Thank you for joining us today, Michelle. Always good to have you on.
Thanks, Corey. Nice to be here.
Yeah.
Lots to discuss on the city.
Oh, there sure is. It's as I've, on Twitter, again, the Twitter is a mess, as I just recently said, and so on, but I still like it as a playground. And I did mean it when I said a little while back, holy cow, I actually miss Naheed Nenshi, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he was also a climate fanatic. Oh, people have to remember that Calgary already had a climate plan, and there was also Sustainability 2020, which promised in 2010 that by 2020 we would have a prosperous economy and full equity for everyone and things would be golden. But in fact, that's not really how it turned out. So since that was such a big failure, why would we embark on yet another similar kind of project that's even more expensive and something that the citizens were not consulted about? Obviously the current pathways to net zero, I call it pathways to poverty. Obviously, this is a plan that was developed before the election. I mean, you can just see how it's all shaped up. It was never an election issue. It was never on the platform. But immediately after the election, the climate emergency was declared. On what basis? There's no scientific evidence showing there's a climate emergency. The latest IPCC report only mentions crisis once, and that is in regard to media coverage. There's no statement that there's a climate emergency. So, you have to wonder what kind of conniving work was going on in the background before this emergency was declared, and then this plan basically rammed through council without public input.
Well, I mean, we know, seriously, if Jody Gondek had campaigned walking around on the platform saying, I'm going to declare a climate emergency and commit $87 billion in spending, she wouldn't have come in 10th in that race. She kept it to herself purely out of political motive. It's not something she just came up with the day after becoming elected. There's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, actually, I just said that there was not public input, but I take that back because the Calgary Climate Hub, which is a project associated with the Vipon family, and the Vipons are often called the Thunbergs of Canada, if you like. This is a very activist group, very strong grassroots group. They work with the Alliance for the Common Good, Calgary Alliance for the Common Good, I think it's called. Anyway, there are a lot of well-meaning, very activist people who obviously have bent the ear of council. And, Calgarians, being an energy city, Calgarians should remember that the Calgary Climate Hub has received charitable tax receipts via Al Gore's Climate Reality. And Al Gore has been a long-term cheerleader for the destruction of Keystone and of TMX and Kinder Morgan's work trying to get a pipeline to the coast. So, we have this very activist group that's actually been funded by somebody who is completely against the city of Calgary's fundamental industry. And people should be asking a lot of questions about that. Not to mention, some of these activist groups have also been funded by unions like CUPE. And we should be asking, why are public unions that are paid by taxpayers funding these environmental groups or climate activist groups that are blocking jobs, running up crazy green crony capitalist projects like those in the climate plan, and maybe even double or triple dipping because perhaps those union pension funds are invested in the very projects that the city is now proposing. So you see, I see it this way. Let's say you're elected to some city somewhere in the world, and just after you're elected, someone comes to you and says, hey, you know about the golden pension plan we have? Well, we have huge unfunded liabilities, and you won't get a pension unless you do this. Just think about that for a minute. And there is some evidence in an article that I saw recently from the States that that's exactly what's going on. So I think that there should be a full inquiry into this.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll get back to that. When you've got $87 billion being spent, the parasites and opportunists are going to come out of the woodworks and the deals are going to start getting cut. I mean, it's just a massive amount in a small market. But, some of it we could kind of say it's not like we didn't have warning. There were canaries in the coal mine for a long time on this, and I dug into that a lot in years gone by, and I'm sure you're familiar with the old Imagine Calgary document. And
Yes,
then she was one of the people who wrote that. And that fairy tale of a document was tax funded. And the stuff that you read in it, it was like a parody. It was crazy with these goals and things it was setting. And most of it was laughed off at that time. But Sustainability Calgary, which is a branch of City Hall, was modeled after that ludicrous document. And it's still out there. I got it on my own site at corymorgan.com where I broke it down because, I mean, it is nutty. But you've got people in power. You've got a mayor. You've got a whole office of the city dedicated to following the tenets of that weird manifesto, and that was from 10 years ago. Yet
that's right.
we let it slide.
Yeah, and we also did a rebuttal report to Imagine Calgary, and that we sent to the city auditor and to the provincial auditor and to Naheed Nenshi at the time. And, you know, of course, we never heard back from anyone, but we think that there were some very serious breaches of public trust in how these things are developed. And of course, at a municipal level, the climate activists have much easier access to government and much more influence. You know, one of the things to note is that Dr. Vipond's daughter, Sadie Vipond, is now a climate activist. She met with Greta Thunberg when Greta and her dad Svante were here in Calgary. And I think she even gave her her jacket or something like that. And so Sadie is suing the Canadian government along with a group of other kids with eco-justice. So there's more taxpayers' dollars that are being totally wasted on ridiculous efforts to stop climate change when, you know, climate has been changing for 4.5 billion years, and the best thing we could do is to adapt to the real threats like flooding in the river valley, like extreme weather. We should have sufficient winter road clearing equipment, you know, so that people aren't waiting for a Chinook so they can get out of their driveway. I mean, these are the practical things that a city is supposed to take care of. They're not supposed to be trying to reduce the emissions of Calgary, which are nothing compared to China's, which China admits 28% of the world's emissions. Canada, all of Canada, 1.6% of the world's emissions. So nothing we do in Calgary or in Canada will stop global warming, if that's your concern. Nothing we do will stop it.
Yeah, and then
it's just empty virtue signaling.
Well, plus they give this baloney out all the time saying if we don't do it, it's going to cost us more. They never exactly say how. But then if they attribute anything and everything to climate change, you know, they might be able to try and make that case. Oh, well, there'll be more flooding and it'll cost this, or there'll be more forest fires and it'll cost this. But boy, even with all of the natural events that have happened over the last few years, nothing is going to add up to $87 billion, and nothing we do is going to change those events from happening.
Right. And a lot of people don't know that Calgary had 8 of the worst floods prior to 1933. And 2 of those floods had higher stream flows than the one of 2013. That's long before human influence on climate change was even attributed. And they also make reference to the Fort McMurray wildfire in their document. Well, you know, that was under an extreme weather condition, and it was poorly managed by the NDP at the time. In fact, Rachel Notley, remember her standing up in the House and mocking Brian Jean as he was begging her to send water bombers? Well, his house burned down a few hours later. She was mocking him for fear mongering. So, you know, I mean, just like winter snowstorms where you need road clearance equipment, we live near the boreal forest. Well, Calgary, not so much, but Edmonton and north, and you're going to have wildfires. It's a seasonal occurrence. So be prepared, you know, and that's what we should be spending the money on, is being prepared for these real events that will happen every year. Sometimes greater, sometimes lesser, but we should be prepared and not be spending money on trying to make people ride a bike to work. If they want to, go ahead, but not everyone's going to want to. And if you're, let's say if you're 75, you're not going to want to ride a bike to the grocery store, because if you fall off, then you'll be in hospital with a broken hip. You know, some of these plans are just totally ludicrous.
Yeah, well, the event that happened this year was Canada Day skiing at Sunshine Village in the mountains. It was cool enough that we could ski in July. Uh,
Yeah, so much for the heat dome.
and then at the same time, Mayor Gondek just does seem to love emergencies. You know, all of those threats for the flood that never was. I mean, we poured dirt all over the streets and we put the city on edge and we declared another state of emergency for something that never even came close. I mean, I understand being prepared, watching. Fair enough. You know, they'll catch it if the river did burst the banks and nothing had been done. But from all reports out of that too, the reservoirs were still nearly empty. The water flow was controlled. They thrive on keeping the population afraid.
Yes, well, I think it probably was prudent to drop the reservoir somewhat because the reports coming in, the forecast was fairly significant rainfall, and you never know if you'll get that or not. I mean, I think in the 2013 flood, initially the reports were that it wouldn't be that much rain, and it kind of quickly went from 50 millimeters to 100 to 150 millimeters, and then people were going, "Oh my God!" So you never really know, but one thing to think about when you empty a reservoir like that, that's a huge body of water. You better hope you're going to get enough rain and runoff after that to refill it, because you've got a city of 1.6 million people and that's their source of water. So, dropping the reservoir is a plan that you can use to help mitigate a flood, but it also may have significant consequences, unintended consequences down the road. And I guess we'll have to see this summer. I don't know if it's filled up again or not. I think there's still snowpack up in the hills. But again, we're spending money in the wrong places. We're spending it on green crony capitalists. We're going along with activists. We're not doing a full cost benefit analysis. We have a blog post where we have our City of Calgary emergency rebuttal report. We have our two 2017 reports, which also address the climate plans of that time. And I'm also going to put up our rebuttal to Catherine Hayhoe. Now, Dr. Hayhoe is a fairly well-known climate science communicator. I think she was judged to be in the top 100 science communicators by Time magazine. But she's hooked on what's called RCP 8.5, which is a catastrophic scenario that's deemed to be implausible by the climate science community. But that's the one she concentrates on as business as usual. And she's been a consultant to the City of Calgary. So we know where this wrong information is coming from. And so people should read our report. It's called Facts versus Fortune Telling. And I'll be posting it right after the show on the same blog post about our climate emergency rebuttals.
I'll ask at the end as well. I mean, just to remind everybody, but yeah, the Friends of Science website and blog posts, they're a fantastic resource. Always lots of information and source and science behind it, of course. Going further, I mean, into the costs, I've heard apologists for this plan saying, look, it's not all straight tax dollars. We're not just going to raise it 87 billion. The private market's going to fill it and other levels of government are going to fill it. That still always ends up coming out of our wallet, though.
Yeah, other levels of government, where do you think they get their money from? They get it from taxpayers. That's you. And I mean, people should be aware that the city of Ottawa is also doing a big climate plan, $60 billion. So you Calgarians will be able to help Ottawa pay for their $60 billion climate plan, while Ottawa will be able to help us pay for our $87 billion climate plan. Now, to see how that's not going to work out, like, when are we going to run out of money?
Well, and some of these costs as well are costs, I guess, that they're estimating because they're going to be imposing retrofitting on existing buildings, possibly even personal homes, definitely in the commercial sector, even though we got over 30% vacancy as it is, putting more expense on Calgary's offices, I don't think is going to help. But these costs, again, they're buried in a whole number of ways they plan to expend it. And they try to obfuscate by claiming it's going to be coming out of here and coming out of there. But again, it always comes out of us in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and actually, one citizen sent us in a letter that they had sent to actually the David Suzuki Foundation, which was campaigning for the city and its residents to sign on to this deal. And this person noted that of the tab, that the Calgary 2022 net expenditures are $4.5 billion. So if we break down the 87 billion tab by year, that would be 3.1 billion a year, which is 69% of the current municipal expenditures. So, what's going to happen to all the ordinary necessary things like road maintenance, taking trees down when we've had a big windfall, running our fire department, police department? These, these are vital services. This is what the city should be taking care of. As I said, China emits in 1 month what all of Canada emits in a year and a half. So spending all this money will do absolutely zero to stop climate change, but it will make a lot of green cronies rich. And we should be asking who those people are and how they are skimming the public purse, because that's what it really amounts to.
Well, yeah, if we want to get to the bottom of it, when they bring in a law saying all of these businesses or buildings have to be retrofitted, I'd like to see who the contractors are who are going to be establishing that, or even what has to be done, or the inspections. There's a whole lot of people who are going to benefit a heck of a lot from this sudden milking of individuals of their funds. And let's not pretend we're not going to see some sole source contracts going out there.
Right. And I mean, all we have to do is look at Germany right now, which has spent trillions of dollars trying to go green and go net zero and go all wind and solar. Their entire industry is on its knees. Like, Germany is on the brink of collapse because they haven't had thoughtful energy and climate policies. They've had ridiculous energy and climate policies very similar to those discussed in this $87 billion climate plan. And we have to ask, who are the people who are doing the consulting? I'm reading a book by Jeremy Rifkin called the Near Zero something Society. And he brags about consulting to Merkel. Well, he's not an engineer. He's a futurist. So it's all nice to sit around and dream of how the world might be, just like the Imagine Calgary crew did. What's it going to look like 100 years from now? Well, my grandmother spent her honeymoon at the Calgary Stampede, the first one in 1912. And she could not have ever imagined how Calgary would be 100 years later. That's how ridiculous these kinds of exercises are. And we should not be bankrupting our city and allowing people who hate the energy industry to drive the agenda that runs our city. That's absurd. It's self-destructive. Why are we doing it?
Well, absolutely. And there's a lot of goals set out in that document that they don't specify how they're going to get to them. But things such as that, 60% of the city or more is going to be either riding a bike or taking the bus to work. They're not going to use cars anymore. And I mean, it's clearly ridiculous. They can't even get people to ride the train today because they're too scared to take on the addicts who have taken over the transit system. But when push comes to shove and they get desperate, I can see some crazy measures like closing roads, taxing cars, all sorts of means to try and force people to take, the crack trains to come downtown to the empty offices. But it's just not going to happen. It's just going to be cost with no benefit.
Well, as you say, it's going to be an eco-dictatorship. And, if you look at Deutsche Bank, that's their answer to Build Back Better, is to impose an eco-dictatorship on society. And one of the examples that Deutsche Bank gives is the idea of retrofitting a house, that some people may not want to retrofit their house because it might make your house look pretty ugly, or some people may not have the money, or they may simply not want to comply. Well, their answer to that is to simply impose an eco-dictatorship. So, there's another thing that people should look at on our YouTube page, and that's a presentation that Donna Laframboise did for us. She's an investigative journalist, and she's been working on the climate file for many years. And it's about how climate activism is taking away your freedom of choice, freedom of speech, and freedom of thought. And that's exactly what we see happening.
Yeah, no, and the trend isn't stopping. It's getting worse. So I appreciate the work you guys have been doing to try and shine a light on it, and you're still working at it. And so, I mean, just that one last time, where can people find, as you said, you got a YouTube page, you've got a blog, there's a lot of resources. If we can point people that way to find out more details on what's happening.
Thank you. Yes, we're on our website is friendsofscience.org. We have a Facebook page. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter. we're all over YouTube, and we have quite a lot of very popular YouTube videos. We actually do have a YouTube rebuttal to the City of Calgary plan, which is one of the top ones that you'll see in the first line of our YouTube videos. But we've got lots of different scientific presentations for people who want that more hard science, and we've got more public commentaries and plain language explanations. So you can also become a member. You can also donate to us. We're into our 20th year of operation. Even $20 would be helpful. So thank you for giving us a bit of a platform, and let's stop this crazy climate nonsense. We got to stop it.
I appreciate the work you're doing, and then appreciate you coming on to talk to us. It's always a good conversation. So thanks, Michelle. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you. Okay.